This is the new 2025 Lexus LX 700H, and it's the ultimate Lexus luxury SUV. Lexus makes 7 different SUVs, and this is the most expensive version of the most expensive one. The new part is a bigger engine than before, with a big power boost. And today, I'm going to review this LX 700H and show you all of its quirks and features. Before we get started, are you ready for your next cool car? Sell your enthusiast car on Cars and Bids. Trading in your car to dealers means you aren't getting market value for your car, leaving you with less cash for your next fun car. Just look at our recent sales of these cool cars compared to current trade-in value. This is a trade-in offer, and this was the Cars and Bids result. This is a trade-in offer, and this was the Cars and Bids result. This is the trade-in offer, and this is the Cars and Bids result. Get started now on carsandbids.com. Sell on Cars and Bids and join the best community to sell your enthusiast car. All right, time for the quirks and features of the new LX 700H, starting with the basics. The newest version of the Lexus LX came out a couple of years ago for the 22 model year, and it's based on the global Toyota Land Cruiser. I say global because there's a Land Cruiser that's sold here in the States, but the overseas Land Cruiser is radically different from the one that we get here in North America. Overseas, the Land Cruiser, they call it the 300 series, is a much tougher, more durable, more capable one than the puny Land Cruiser we get here in the States. Now, in the past, Toyota used to sell previous versions of this full-size Land Cruiser, but it went away after the 21 model year. And now, the only way to get the global Toyota Land Cruiser here in America is to buy the Lexus version, which is the LX, the new LX. Now, the regular version of the new LX is called the LX 600, and it uses a twin-turbo V6, about 410 horsepower, and about 485 pound-feet of torque, and that starts around $106,000. I reviewed this new LX 600 about 3 years ago when it was first coming out for the US market. But the big news for 25 is the arrival of this model, the LX 700H. It finally puts Toyota's twin-turbo hybrid V6 inside the Lexus LX. And I say finally because this engine has been available in full-size Toyota trucks and SUVs, the Tundra and the Sequoia, for several years now, and it's only just getting added to the LX. This powertrain is impressive. It adds a hybrid system to the twin-turbo V6, and the result is about 455 horsepower and about 585 pound-feet of torque. So it's an increase of 45 horsepower and about 100 pound-feet compared to the standard LX 600. It is a huge boost for acceleration, performance, and towing, and because it's a hybrid powertrain, it actually gets better fuel economy. It's not significant. According to the EPA, it's only 1 mile per gallon better in combined city and highway driving than the regular LX 600 for about 20 miles per gallon. But 1 more mile per gallon plus the power boost is actually a pretty big win. More efficiency, more power, more torque. The LX 700H has it all. As for pricing, the LX 700H starts right around $116,000, which is the very top of the price scale for the LX 600, the base model. That's still available. It's cheaper, but now this one shows up a more expensive, more powerful alternative, the LX 700H. Now, also cool and notable and new for 25 is this trim level, which is called Overtrail. It's an off-road focused trim level of the new LX, and it's only offered on the LX 700H, this new hybrid version, and it has a few cool features. For one, you get all-terrain tires. You can see these knobby tires, which are more off-road capable than your street tires. You also get a skid plate, as you can see, to protect the underside of the car from anything you might encounter on on the trails, and most importantly, you get locking front and rear differentials. The LX comes standard with a center diff lock, but front and rear means this has triple locking differentials like a Mercedes G-Wagon. It's very rare in the car industry, but it should make this tremendously capable, this new Overtrail model. Now, interestingly, the Overtrail is actually the base model of the new LX700H. If you want more luxurious trims, they cost more, $120,000, $125,000 and up, but the Overtrail is the one with the base starting price around $116,000. So let's talk LX quirks, starting with its sizing, which is actually an interesting quirk of this vehicle. Because the LX is based on the global market Toyota Land Cruiser, it's not designed as a ground-up luxury SUV. They take a Land Cruiser and they luxurify it to become this. And the result is that sizing is surprisingly different from some of its competitors that are designed from the ground up to be luxury SUVs. For instance, this is about 5 inches shorter in overall length than the BMW X7 and the Mercedes-Benz GLS, and it's also about 2 inches narrower in width. Those are surprisingly big numbers considering that most rivals are all basically the same size. This one is smaller, which gives it a smaller footprint and should make it kind of easier to drive in city settings, tight, compact areas. From a sizing perspective, that's true. We'll find out if that really feels true in terms of maneuverability when I get behind the wheel a little later. Other interesting quirks on the outside of this vehicle, for one, the grille. This massive, giant, distinctive Lexus grille. This is something Lexus has really pushed in a lot of its vehicles recently, the huge Lexus grille, to make it more distinctive and aggressive. Now, pairing with that, around back you have the word Lexus spelled out on the tailgate. Rather than the old school L emblem they used to put on all their vehicles, they spell out Lexus in big letters, and I think both of these things, the grille and the Lexus badging, is an attempt to make it more aggressive, more in-your-face, distinctively Lexus. I don't know if they thought they were losing market share or people had a difficult time identifying these cars, but now it is very much more Lexus, thanks to the grille and the badge. And next we move inside the new LX, and the interior is, I would say, interesting. There are some great benefits in here and some interesting drawbacks that you wouldn't necessarily expect. The most obvious benefit of this interior is everything looks nice. The materials they use in here are fantastic, and even though this starts its life as the workhorse Land Cruiser in other markets, they do a fantastic job of not making you feel like there was ever a base level version of this car. It has lovely leather, this open wood in the center console. Everything looks and feels good. Even when Lexus uses plastic, like on this dial here, it's this textured, shiny plastic that looks nice and feels good to touch, and they use that basically everywhere. There are very few low quality materials in here and very few things that would make you think this is anything other than an ultra high-end luxury SUV, at least from the standpoint of everything you can see and touch. However, one of the big drawbacks of this interior also comes from its roots as the global market Land Cruiser. Specifically, it's just not very beautiful in here. The Mercedes-Benz GLS has all this gorgeous mood lighting and a beautiful swoopy interior designed to be a luxury car's interior. But because this is the Land Cruiser first and the LX second, this just isn't like that. It's designed to be more utilitarian and more basic. They add to it to make it more luxurious, but you can see in some ways they kind of fall short. And the most obvious place of that is this center control stack, which frankly is just a load of buttons and screens and dials and switches in a busy and overwhelming manner. Other automakers can stick all this stuff in one massive center screen and make it all look so nice, but here it's a real hodgepodge of buttons, multiple screens, and a lot of controls. So with that in mind, let's go through them and talk about what they do. You start on the bottom here and you can see your controls for heated and cooled seats and the heated steering wheel. Now, one interesting thing in Lexus models is you don't just turn this stuff on or off, there's also an auto setting. Auto for heated and cooled seats and the steering wheel, which seems odd. Automatic climate control for the air conditioning or heat is pretty common, but here you also have it for these items. And in fact, you can have a fully automatic climate experience in this car. You just press this button here marked Climate Concierge concierge, and once you set a desired temperature, it makes sure that all of the possible climate control things are doing what they can to maintain that temperature. So you turn that on, and then your heated steering wheel, your heated and cooled seats, and your climate control system are all trying to regulate your temperature at the one you've selected, and that is pretty cool. Now, to select a temperature, you have this group of buttons and switches here, interestingly not integrated into a screen, despite the fact that there are two center screens in here, but this is how you change your temperature, and you can see it appears on the screen and shows, the fan speed, where the air is coming out, all of your temperature settings here, which is pretty nice. Now, this central screen, not the main infotainment screen, but the secondary one below it, it also can display some other interesting stuff. It can show you, for example, your ride height setting, the current setting that you're in. It can show you if you're in four-wheel drive high or four-wheel drive low. There's also a G-force meter on here, so you can measure that if for some reason you might want to. And it can also show your braking and acceleration use, like how much percentage of the pedal you're using at any given time. All of those features are displayed right on this screen. Also displayed here is your current drive mode, and you can adjust your drive mode using this dial here below the screen marked Mode Select. Now, the interesting thing about this Mode Select dial is that it actually has various different functions depending on which button in the center you have pressed. If you have it on drive mode, then Mode Select adjusts your drive mode. But if you switch over to MTS, that stands for Multi-Terrain Select, and then your drive mode dial becomes a terrain selection dial, and you can choose like sand if you're driving on sand, or mud or rocks or whatever it is you're driving on, you can select, and then the vehicle will adjust its four-wheel drive system and its traction control to maximize its driving capabilities on that surface. You also have a button here marked DAC/crawl, which turns on the crawl control feature in this vehicle, and that's one of the great off-roading features that exists. It can help you get out of really stuck situations in a pretty impressive way, and it's one of the reasons that I've always favored Toyota off-roaders. Crawl control is awesome. Now, also here on the climate controls, you have a button, this one, for the heated windshield. This doesn't just have like climate vents that blow on the windshield to heat it. It actually has heating coils through the windshield that will clear ice. It's very effective, nice off-road feature. And this dial lets you select between high four-wheel drive and low range four-wheel drive, which is nice to have. Now, that's a lot of stuff we've talked about, but we're nowhere near done with all of the center controls. You also have this array of buttons in the center console, the parking brake, the hold feature for stoplights. You can raise or lower the suspension here. You also have your center diff lock button here, which is nice. For the front and rear diff lockers, there are separate buttons kind of hidden behind the steering wheel located right here. You can turn those on if you want, so that's even more center controls. And you have a wireless phone charger here, which you can see, and then you have your center console, which is a very cool feature. You can push a button on the driver's side and it opens up towards the driver. You can see a nice storage area here with a cool box function, so you can turn this on as a cooler and keep stuff cold. It's not a refrigerator. It won't actually refrigerate things, but it'll keep like a sandwich cold on your drive home or whatever you want. Now, the interesting thing about this center console is there's also a button on the passenger side you can push and open it the other direction. So you can open it on either side, and it's just magic. You close it on one side, open it on the other. I'm not really sure how they do it, but it's brilliant, and it's a neat way to solve the problem of how do you open this to maximize usability. Well, both front occupants have the same access because of this trick feature. Now, I've shown you all of this stuff in the center console. I haven't even talked about the gear lever or the cup holders, but you get what those do. And we still haven't even covered the main infotainment screen, which is mounted on the top of all these things. Now, thankfully, this is actually a pretty simple infotainment system. You see it in other Toyota and Lexus models, and it's very easy to use. A simple, responsive touchscreen. If you don't use Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, it's all very simple and well laid out. And if you do use those features, they integrate nicely into this screen. Thankfully, this screen is pretty simple, even if everything else here is relatively complicated and a little overwhelming. Now, on the subject of screens, we move on to the gauge cluster screen, which in the new LX is a pretty impressive situation. It is quite configurable, so you can have it show all sorts of different stuff, like a map in the center, or music on the side, or vehicle displays and information, tire pressures, whatever you want to see, you can configure pretty much exactly what you want. This is
one of the big complaints I have in my new Toyota Sequoia with a similar gauge cluster. It's just not that configurable. But here, you can have it show anything you might want, basically, at any time directly in your line of sight, which is pretty cool to see. And on the subject of screens, worth pointing out there is one more, and that's the rear view mirror. It's not just a rear view mirror. You flip this switch and it becomes a screen projecting images from a camera mounted in the back of the car. The benefit here is if you're loaded up with passengers and cargo and you can't see out the back, well, your rear view mirror camera, that's not obstructed and you can see very easily. It's a great feature, and I'm thrilled that this vehicle and other Toyota and Lexus models include it. It really helps for safety. And speaking of safety, another great feature in this vehicle that I absolutely love, to the left of the steering wheel, you have a button marked View. If you press this button while you're in drive, it instantly pulls up the camera system, the front camera and the top-down camera view, so you have a good look at exactly where the vehicle is positioned. And that's wonderful to see. In a big car like this, it's nice to be able to see the exact corners and sizing of the vehicle with the simple press of a button, rather than having to go into some menu screen to find the camera. I really like that. With that said, one kind of safety drawback in this vehicle is the gear selector situation. It's pretty easy to use. You kind of move it down and to the left for drive, up and to the left for reverse. The drawback is that when you open the door, it doesn't automatically shift into park. Basically, every other electronic-based gear selector like this one does do that, but not here. You can have the car in drive, open the door, and just take off, drive off, which has been a safety issue in a lot of vehicles over all the years with old school shift levers. It's a shame to see they haven't fixed that for this one. And next we move into the back seat of the new LX, which is frankly quite large. I'm actually surprised, given the smaller overall dimensions of this vehicle compared to rivals, just how big the back seat is here. You got good space in back. Even me as a tall adult, for hips, leg, head, it's all pretty good back here. And you have some nice luxury and convenience features in back. For instance, a full climate control system back here. Each rear passenger can set their own temperature. You can set the fan speed in back, and you have heated and cooled rear seats on both sides back here, which is a really nice feature to have. I also like the fact that the climate vents are not just these two vents in the center, but you have supplemental climate vents in the ceiling to add even more comfort when you adjust the climate control to your desired temperature. Now, one interesting thing in this area, there are power ports in here, but they're hidden behind this rather unusual little door panel. I'm not sure why they bothered to do that, but that's how you access your two USB-C ports for rear passengers to charge their devices. Now, worth pointing out that there is a center seat in this vehicle, a rear center seat, so you don't have individual captain's chairs back here. Although if you did have a rear center passenger, they would have decent space. You do have a pretty big hump in the floor that robs footroom, but there's just so much space back here, the rear passenger can put their feet basically anywhere and still be comfortable. One interesting drawback about this rear seat, though, is the only cup holders in the second row are located in the rear center armrest. So you drop the armrest, the cup holders are right here behind this panel, as you can see, which is nice, but that means no cup holder access if you have someone in this seat. So if you're going to be frequently using all the seats, that could be a drawback. One nice feature in back, though, is the sunshades, built-in sunshades into the rear doors, which is a nice feature if you're carrying around infants. You don't want sun to come onto them directly. Nice to have that built into the car. And another quirk in the back seat worth pointing out, I showed you that magic center console lid up front where you can open it from both sides. Well, you can also open it from the back. You press this little button here, and then the lid lifts open from the back seat, so even rear passengers have access. I guess they figure that's because it's the cool box, so there might be some food in there for front or rear passengers. Everybody gets access. It is a magic center console. Now, as for the third row, some rather interesting third row items in here. For one, access. It's pretty easy. You have this latch on the side of the second row seat. You pull it and then the seat folds down, folds forward, gives you easy access to the third row. One drawback of this car and third row access, however, is there's no latch that allows the second row seat to just fall forward without changing its shape. That's beneficial for car seats. If you don't want to take a car seat out just to get people into the third row, it's nice to have that feature which some other three-row SUVs have, but you don't have it here. And that drawback is only magnified over on the passenger side, where folding the second row seat folds both the side seat and the center seat as one piece. So if you have a car seat back here in any of those two seats, it means you'd have to take it out to get into the third row. A little bit inconvenient. But once you're in the third row, it's actually surprisingly nice back here. There's okay legroom. It's not huge, but relatively competitive in the segment, again, despite this vehicle's smaller size, but you have some nice features. For one, you get two individual cup holders on each side. So 4 third row cup holders, that's more than you get in the second row. You also have individual charge ports for devices back here, which is nice. You have individual climate vents on the ceiling for your third row passengers, which is really nice. And you have a power operated backrest because the third row seat can fold power automatically. And so third row passengers sitting in the seat can use that folding function to operate their backrest to their exact comfort level. I actually think for some smaller people, it might be more desirable to sit in the third row than back here in the second. And speaking of folding that third row seat, one other cool feature here is that you can fold and unfold the third row from the second row. If you fold down the second row seat to get a kid into the third row and then you realize that the third row seat is folded down, you don't have to go all the way around to the cargo area to fold the third row back up. There's a nifty little button right here, very easy and convenient, that you can press to put the seat right back in place, which is nice to have, and you have that on both sides, which really adds some convenience. But anyway, next we move on to the cargo area in the new LX, and the first thing worth pointing out back here is, yes, beep, beep, beep. The cargo area is small. Behind the third row seats, you have basically no space with those seats in place. And you can see, like I mentioned, there's a lot of passenger room in the second row and the third row, even though the car is smaller than rivals. Well, you can see where that space came from. They took it away from the cargo area, which is just really, really small back here. But when you put the third row seats down, which of course you can also do from the cargo area, put them down, and you will have a completely flat space back here. If you don't need to use those third row seats, you have a pretty good cargo area, or you can just put one down at a time if you need to use the other one. So with the third row in place, pretty small, but there are options. It's also nice to have this little cargo shelf where you can put stuff on top of it, but also some smaller, maybe more fragile items below it if you want to keep them from rolling around with the rest of the cargo. This shelf is also removable if you don't want it to be in there, but frankly, I think it's kind of nice to have it in place for most situations. Also worth pointing out, in the cargo area behind this panel here, lift it up and you can see a household style power outlet, which is great to have. I wish there was also one somewhere in the passenger compartment, maybe in the second row in the center console, but I'll take one anywhere in the car. It's nice to have this here to charge larger devices that don't necessarily work on a USB-C, like a computer. That is really convenient for a lot of different reasons to have that power outlet in the vehicle, and it's nice to see it there. So there's your tour of the new LX700H. I'm also curious what it's like out on the road with the new, more powerful hybrid powertrain in the Lexusified Land Cruiser. Let's find out. All right, driving the LX700H. Getting in this car has actually been quite interesting for me, as I bought for myself a Toyota Sequoia TRD Pro, which is Toyota's top SUV, also body on frame, that shares the engine with this. And so I was obviously kind of curious, like, how is this going to compare? And I have to say, when I first reviewed the new Lexus LX, it was a couple of years ago when it very first came out, the LX600, I was pretty critical of the way this car drove. You know, at this price point, I was comparing it to the Mercedes GLS, the BMW X7, those cars are smoother, and I was saying the LX is really surprisingly not all that smooth or comfortable or luxurious considering the segment that it's in. It's a body on frame trucky SUV, and it drives like that. That was my criticism. However, having owned the Sequoia now for a year and driven it 10,000 miles, That feels so much more trucky. And I get into this and I'm actually kind of surprised by how much they have been able to mute the trucky feeling in this vehicle. This is still body on frame, old school truck-based construction, and yet it doesn't really feel that bad now that I have a little bit more perspective driving body on frame truck-based SUVs. Now, I want to be clear here. This is still not as smooth as a BMW X7 or a Mercedes-Benz GLS, which are probably its biggest rivals. And Lexus has this reputation for, not necessarily performance, for actually making these smooth, luxurious, comfortable vehicles. And it's funny because Lexus's big SUVs, the GX and the LX, are not that. They are both truck-based. They are much more capable and utilitarian than their BMW and Mercedes-Benz rivals, and they're less comfortable. But I want to amend my complaints about this vehicle. For a truck-based SUV, it is actually pretty good, pretty comfortable, pretty solid, pretty smooth. Now, with that said, again, you can kind of tell some of the drawbacks of using a truck-based platform for a vehicle. The steering and handling is still pretty ponderous. The GLS drive and the X7 drive so much more like a car than the Lexus LX that it's crazy. There are also benefits, and the biggest benefit undoubtedly is the toughness of the LX. Nothing can beat this in an off-road, over trail, like going hard setting. Nothing. And it's tremendously reliable. I mean, people complain about the new hybrid engines replace the old V8. We like the V8 better. I get it, but I've got the hybrid in my Sequoia. It's been a fantastic powertrain. It has great horsepower. It has great torque, and it's been a reliable powertrain so far for Toyota. They've had some problems with some of the turbo V6s. The hybrids have not been affected, and I've had no issues with mine. This is a solid, tough, and durable truck. And the result of that is that resale value is tremendously strong because there is significant demand in the used market for old Lexus and Toyota trucks because people are so obsessed with the longevity that they have. And so if your plan is to buy and hold and own for a long time, you do not want to get BMW, you do not want to get Mercedes, you want this. And if your plan is to do any sort of off-roading, again, BMW, Mercedes, absolutely not designed for it. This truck is, and again, that's in part because of its basis as the overseas Land Cruiser, where it is sort of this global workhorse. I will say one other thing, since the powertrain is the big new thing that I'm reviewing, it's excellent. I see absolutely no drawbacks with this powertrain, and I think that it really is fantastic, and it does a great job here on the LX. It makes this thing quick, it makes it relatively efficient for a vehicle this size. It is just wonderful mid-range power. Basically, anytime you put your foot down, you get power. I think this is the star of the Lexus LX lineup. I like the non-hybrid version as well, but I think that this is definitely the one to get. If you can spend the money, it is worth it. I do really still think that, the X7, etc., are better vehicles if your only goal is on-road, leasing it for a short term. This is the one you want if you want to own it, preserve your resale value, have a reliable car, and go anywhere and do anything. And it's very capable at all that. It requires a lot of work to switch from a base model global market workhorse Land Cruiser to this luxury vehicle, and they've done as good of a job as they possibly can. And I have mostly positive things to say about it. I definitely see why people get this, and I definitely see why people get the competition, and I think both decisions are good depending on your use case. And so that's the new 2025 Lexus LX700H. This may not have the luxurious car-like driving experience or the smoothness of a BMW X7 or a Mercedes-Benz GLS. But it's tough, it's reliable, and the new powertrain makes it better than ever and more expensive. And now it's time to give this new LX700H a Doug score.
And the Doug score is here, 59 out of 100, which is a significant boost over the Lexus LX 600 I tested when it first came out a few years ago. In fact, the LX 700H Overtrail places just behind the big rivals in this segment, the GLS, the Cadillac Escalade, the Lincoln Navigator, and the BMW X7. I don't think the LX will ever quite beat those cars for the usual things like comfort, technology, ride quality, and interior space, simply by virtue of being developed alongside a global big SUV, the full-size Land Cruiser,
that has to serve so many purposes in so many markets. It'll never be as comfortable as a GLS, which is a purpose-built luxury SUV, or as roomy as a Lincoln Navigator, which is mainly aimed at North American buyers with big roads. But the LX is surprisingly good considering its roots, and it especially excels in two unusual areas. It's exceptionally reliable and it's very capable off-road. Those are two traits most big luxury SUV shoppers aren't especially interested in, but if you are, it's the one to get. And even if you're not, the LX presents an appealing package that's even more desirable with the new 700h powertrain and the Overtrail off-road trim.